Hi, everybody. Welcome to the floor of the CWCB Expo in the Javits Center in New York City.
This is really about the city. This is really about society. This is really about all the things that cannabis means to all of us.
One of the things we really have to do with the people that are in the industry is advocate more for the industry with non-industry people.
We know education cuts across every part of society, whether it's talking to your kids, whether it's talking to people in high school, training college students, talking to people about hemp. That is part of your obligation, really.
There's a lot of education that goes into helping people understand what cannabis is. It's no longer, the devil's lettuce or anything like that, but it's a big real business. It's a big real industry.
That tells you that they know that this market, even though in its infancy, the legalized infancy, that there's a lot of opportunity because they need a bigger booth to accommodate the attendees. And you could hear the background. There's a lot of people here yesterday and today.
Can you explain what maize, M-A-I-Z-E, is?
Corn.
Oh, I love corn. Corn. We'll see you next Friday live on Green Rush. Well, here we are. Another week later, we're still alive and still cooking. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Friday afternoon edition of the Really Live Green Rush Business of Cannabis talk show that we produce here at Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. So happy to be with you again, back in our world headquarters of Clinton, Massachusetts. And we also are very happy and proud that we were able to do about 4 hours worth of live interviews from the floor of the Javits Center in New York at last week's CWCB Expo. I want to thank Christine Iannuzzi and her entire team out there in New York City. And I got to tell you, it is the Big Apple, and it was a lot of people there, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of new people too, because that New York market is just starting to show signs of, well, let's say growth and also early growth issues. Joining me this afternoon, a couple of friends. One is Josh Kincaid from Washington State, and he is with the Talking Hedge podcast out there in Washington State. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Jimmy.
And Michael Corriea, formerly now of the NCIA, but still has the NCIA on his resume. And Michael Corriea, thank you so much for joining us from Washington, D.C. today.
It's great to be here, Jimmy. And technically, I'm still on the clock for 3 more days. So talk to me on Wednesday, and then I'll be former.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I feel bad. We laugh. It's like gallows humor in a lot of ways because there's been a lot of changes and a lot of people, whether it be Trulieve shutting down their dispensary operations in Massachusetts and one in California. There's been a lot of market correction in the cannabis space over the last few months. And it has obviously reared its ugly head at the NCIA as well. And I certainly feel bad that some people that I know there are going to be out on the streets, so to speak. Was this a surprise to you, Michael?
So, I mean, if you know anything about cannabis industry, and you do, the industry is just struggling. You see struggling across the board, big companies, medium companies, small companies. NCIA has been hit over the past couple of years with COVID, not being able to do events. You've seen money coming out of advocacy, and you've just been seeing it across the board. So, no, it's not a shock to me because I've seen our membership numbers go backwards for the past 2 and 3 years. I had to lay off my deputy a month ago, which in itself was tough. But having it come full circle and knowing that it is affecting me now because the revenue is not there to support the staff. NCIA is now, I think, down to 5 people, which is amazing considering we were at 25 people a couple years ago. And so I think that's a good microcosm of just across the industry of what's happening. It's affected us, but it isn't a negative thing. Well, it's negative for me in the short term, but I plan to stay in cannabis. I'm going to open up my own lobby shop. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be talking with you. I'm going to be representing the cannabis industry. It frees me up to talk to everyone, speak my mind, sit on boards, and do amazing stuff for just the industry and the movement. And I'm looking forward to it. Enormous amount of excitement and sheer terror at the same time. And so I'm building this as we go right now, Jimmy, and it's gonna be exciting. And I want to have you part of it as I go through this process.
Oh, good. Welcome. I was going to say, welcome to the hood. I love that. Sheer terror is definitely something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. It really puts us all in the same boat in many ways. Josh, from your perspective, out on the West Coast in Washington State, one of the first two states to go legal. What is it, 2015 maybe? Tell us about what is the impression of the industry out there as you look across the country. Is it the same? Are people adjusting to this market correction at all?
The East Coast is living through the West Coast memes as we speak. Yeah. So you guys are just going through the same thing without even realizing it. There's a lot to be learned, and apparently nobody's learned any of it. What I can tell you, though, is that the industry is broke on the West Coast, the whole industry. But from the West Coast, from my perspective, what I'm seeing is that, a lot of events are not pulling through with revenue. So some are breaking even, some are losing money, depending on what type of cannabis event it is. There's a charity, a completely non-cannabis related. I'm going to a Seahawk golf tournament in Eastern Washington at this resort called Lake Chelan. So a lot of Seahawks are putting this on, and they just gave me a foursome. They're like, here, it's free, just show up. So this is a charity event, and people are not paying for it. So I know whether it's cannabis or not, these things happen. So I can tell you, when I was in the banking industry, every fourth quarter, it seemed like Bank of America or whoever it was, Key Bank, US Bank, wherever I was at, they would always put a freeze on hiring and spending. You literally couldn't order a pencil during the fourth quarter, regardless of the year. And then during a bear market, we haven't seen one in a decade or more, but the last bear market, that was really bad, a lot of layoffs. So really, we're not seeing anything like new, but it is new to the industry because it's the first time in a bear market in a generation, or at least a decade or more, where we're finally starting to see this hit the cannabis industry for the first time. So the layoffs aren't anything new, people going broke, not having money to advertise. All of those things are maybe a shock to those who have been in the industry for the last 10 years. But if you look outside the industry, this is fairly normal within the economic parameters, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So Josh nailed it on the head, the industry, and then just living through it. And listen, it's about survival. Your business, it's about your business surviving. It's what's going on with the state and regulations and taxes and all the things you need to do it. And the biggest thing out there is the illicit market that is still a big part of this industry. And so when you as a business are struggling, you have to make tough choices. And maybe those tough choices aren't in advocacy at the federal level, or aren't in joining trade associations. As important as it is, you just maybe don't have the means to do something like that. And you are seeing it across the boards. And what Josh is saying out west is coming out east. And, I think there was a lot of, if you go back in the time machine to January 2021, there was an enormous amount of excitement with Democrats taking over Congress. You saw stocks at their all-time high because they thought they could get something incrementally done, safe, something. It never materialized. And so there was a pullback, I think. And I hate to say it, I think Chuck Schumer said, he didn't want to kill the industry, and he's basically killing the industry because something like SAFE didn't get passed and people pulled back. So until something like SAFE passes to energize the industry and really get us going, it's going to be really hard to make investments. And this is the one time we need investments in advocacy, is the one time everyone's pulling back. And so, like I said, I want to be around and I want to keep doing this. It's important. The voice needs to be heard on the Hill, but it is a very tough time. And anyone that's lived through recessions knows that they end and knows that it's going to be brighter. It's just right now is at a low point for the cannabis industry.
Michael, I spew these thoughts a lot, opinions, as I look back and I look at the various movements over the last few years. And you can look at the glass as half full or half empty, depending on how you look at it. You've got 23 legal states now. And you've got to think that with a downturn of the economy outside of the cannabis space, I mean, it's not like the cannabis space is unique, because the whole economy right now is at a downturn. And Josh, you mentioned a bear market. So, but wouldn't it be wouldn't it be a good fix if they just descheduled, if they just made one move at the federal level to somehow or other kind of jumpstart what exists in those 23 legal states right now? Wouldn't that have an impact on the overall economy too? In other words, it could almost start it. You know what I mean? It could almost be a catalyst to get it going in the right direction again.
Yeah, I think unleashing the potential. I mean, I've seen the data. It's markets of 20, 30, 50, 75 billion dollars. Being able to unleash that, tax it, regulate it. But, I wish it could just be about Congress delisting or the federal, the administration delisting. There is the day, what happens when the dog catches the car? Then what do you do? And so what does regulations mean? The administration is going through this now. They're having stakeholder meetings. What is a proper schedule, and what the FDA thinks is going to be different than what you and I think. We all know this should be delisted, but they're a government regulatory body, and they deal with drugs, bringing drugs to market. And so they're going to look at cannabis one way. It's our job as advocates to look at another way and keep educating them and getting the public engaged on this issue before it gets forgotten. But I think once you unleash this industry, I mean, think about the jobs that would be created. Think about the small businesses that would be created in the industry. Yes, I do agree with you. You look at what tech has gone through with all the layoffs. That's affecting. I think most of America has built in that we're in a recession, and they've already laid off who they're going to lay off. It's now affecting cannabis for a multiple of reasons.
But isn't there a baby step in here? I mean, I really think the government, and I'm going to put the feds, the states, and even local and town governments have done a great job of making it as difficult as possible to get into the industry. Just to start, just whether you get a license or you're dealing with the industry, you're doing business with the industry, everything is in place to make it as difficult as possible. It's almost like they're testing the resolve of the people that are passionate about the cause.
Well, you mentioned baby steps. Baby step is something like pass and say thank you. That's an enormous baby step.
Right.
The other thing I think is the barriers to entry, the cost to get into this. It isn't just a normal industry. This is an industry that's been illegal for 50, 80, 100 years, that the illicit market has been around. Getting rid of the illicit market is different than just taxing and regulating a commodity. And so you look at a state like Oklahoma, sort of the wild, wild west, where it's a low barrier to entry, and that's all going to price out because there's going to be too many cultivators, too many this, too many that. It's all going to price out because they're not going to make money. But guess what? It is the Wild West, and there's opportunity for someone with a great idea who's entrepreneurial to maybe build up something great versus a different state that may have a very high regulatory model that takes millions of dollars to get involved. I don't have $1 million. Maybe you have $1 million, Jimmy. But or Josh, maybe you guys are just rolling in dough to where you can do this. You need to be able to create something and where the barriers to entry are very low as this, it's an emerging market and let it grow versus a mature market. Later on, let's deal with cannabis 10, 20, 30, 50 years later. But right now, we have to treat it like it's a brand new emerging market, which is going to be different in the future.
Yeah. I get so frustrated when I talk to people like last week in New York. And New York, God love that everybody's trying to do it the right way. Everybody's trying to come up with the perfect rollout of this industry. New York, of course, tries to tie it, and Chuck Schumer with the expungement of records and social equity opportunities. And it's almost like a lot of people want to do it the right way, but nobody's come up with what that right way is. So I just wonder, perhaps the state-by-state model is not exactly working the right way either. And I don't have any idea on where we can go beyond that, but no state has gotten it right yet. And I know, and Washington State probably is the best example of this, Josh, isn't it?
10 years on. So I'll tell you what, in 2015, I joined a committee to overturn the felony on maintaining and operating a cannabis lounge. And I wrote the bill, finally 2019 submitted it, had a senator, a House Rep Kloba was going to sponsor it. Then COVID hit. Now they want to dissect that bill out of convenience and push just what works for them, which is to have an event, temporary pop-up, temporary license. So when you say, oh, let's just push something out in New York, let's just get this done and then we'll go back and change it. Nah, a decade later in Washington, we're still screwed. 10 years later, we still have, 8 years almost, we still have issues with this cannabis lounge, and it's not going to get fixed in the next couple of years. So you're going to want to do that right. And I think maybe the way is to look outside the box, because caffeine with coffee is psychoactive, but there's Department of Ag that you deal with, not the Liquor and Cannabis Board. So if we don't even really worry about the milligrams of a psychoactive ingredient like caffeine, why can't we get behind that with the Department of Ag and have another psychoactive component called cannabis? And I'll tell you the reason why we can't. And it's simple. You said, well, why aren't we moving forward at the legislative level, at the government level? And I'll tell you, is because it's not additional revenue. It's not additional taxes. It's more of a substitution. There will be minor improvements with taxes, but what you're going to see is a massive decrease in alcohol taxes and sales. And there's lobbyists pushing against that. You see that in every single state that has a rollout. There's a decreased number of DUIs, decreased number of alcohol, decreased number of taxes coming from alcohol. Washington State just surpassed tax revenue of cannabis over alcohol for the first time. And that's a really scary situation for the alcohol companies. Then you have paper. Big Timber doesn't want hemp to replace them. That goes way, way back to the very beginnings of prohibition. Then you have Big Pharma. They don't want cannabis in there. And then plastic company, I could keep going on. Plastic doesn't want hemp. Plastic doesn't want their anything to be substituted. So there are mergers, buyouts, opportunities. But when you talk about increase, it's not going to just come out of nowhere and be an additional revenue source. It has to come from somewhere. And you're going to take money from the plastic companies, from Big Pharma, from alcohol, from all these other companies. And there's lobbyists saying, nah, we're not moving fast on that yet. So they will eventually, and then those big companies will just go buy those cannabis entities to help them. And there'll be mergers and stuff. But there's big pushback at the federal level because they're all owned by lobbyists. I don't care if they're a Democrat or a Republican. The only difference between the two is how fast the individual's been at the need of lobbyists.
Okay, Michael, your turn.
One, I agree. I agree with everything, and even throwing lobbyists under the bus, even though I am a lobbyist. And he is so true that you just can't legalize cannabis and create this on a whim. There are other industries that it affects. And you mentioned the state models. Here's my perspective. There's no one regulatory model that's perfect. And the last thing I want is a one size fits all, because if you put a shitty executive in front of that, you're going to get a bad result. I would rather have 50 different regulatory models, because if one works, the others can see what works and what doesn't. And you mentioned, New York and other states. Everyone wants to create this perfect system. The problem is when it comes to equity, diversity, and other things, and people talk about limiting applicants and limiting permitting, that's going to drive the cost up. You start driving the cost up, you have fewer people who have access to that cash to get in, which means it's not helpful for small businesses or minority-owned businesses. So it's that very fine line. You mentioned New York about what they're trying to do with the grant program. Well, you have to fill that grant program up with money to allow it to be able to get to these businesses. And so small businesses need access to cash, safe banking. They need access to cheaper cash where it's doable. At the same time, they need to have the resources to run their business, and they need to have grant programs out there that help them, or else they will just get eaten up by the larger ones. And capitalism rules applies, but we don't need to speed that up. We can still create this industry at a scratch that's small business, entrepreneurial, that's focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, all these things. But is not going to happen on its own. And you see a lot of these states, they have great intentions, and then 3 years later, 5 years later, they realize nothing ever came to fruition. And so that's something, I don't want to repeat that at the federal level, but it means you need to be engaged. It means you need to be active, and thus where advocacy money is going down, it's a lot harder to represent those industries because other regulated industries out there, whether it's pharma or whether it's tobacco or alcohol or something, they're out there and they're talking about cannabis.
And we've talked about this before. Out of those big alcohol, big tobacco, big pharma, which of those biggies is going to be, are they all going to be anti-cannabis, or is there one in particular that may just come in and be like, the Lone Ranger, come in and help out this industry and lift it up and give it the financial backing that it needs to get stuff done?
Well, I mean, you're talking about capitalism here. In capitalism,
Yeah.
People want to make money. So when you say good or bad, I think everyone's watching it. Cigarettes, Kronos, is in there. They're watching it. They're engaged. You mentioned alcohol with Constellation Brands and Canopy, like they're there. A big pharma, I look at big pharma as they look at this as an opportunity and a threat. An opportunity to get engaged and to bring new drugs to market that help people. The threat meaning, if you are on cannabis, maybe you are not taking opioids like you were before. And so therefore that is a major source of revenue for pharma, to where they want to make money. And I hate to say it, if that is you using opioids, how do you get off that? That's going to hurt their bottom line. And Josh mentioned about companies and their bottom line and self-interest. Everyone's there. I don't think they're opposed to it. I don't think they're trying to stop it, but everyone definitely has an angle on, how they look best the day after legalization and how they're best positioned with legalization, and they are trying to get to that outcome versus good or bad or stopping or what have you. And Josh mentioned lobbyists. You're a bad lobbyist if you don't represent your interests. My job is to represent interests, and those interests tend to be on the small business and the cause. But if I were representing larger MSOs, I would try to be good at my job and do my job to represent those interests. I just hope people who care about this issue and care about doing it right and want the good outcome support people like me and the cause, so we have a voice at the table versus the voice of the table is alcohol and pharma, cigarettes, and bigger operators, because you will get legalization. It'll just be skewed towards them.
If you look back historically at some of the states that have legal, vibrant cannabis economies, if you will, and I don't know if you could pick which state is doing it right the most successfully or not. I don't know if it's Arizona or if it's Michigan, or everybody has issues with it for sure. But it seems to me that decriminalization has been introduced at the state level before legalization enters into a regulatory market. If you look back on the history, pretty much every state that is adult use legal started with a decrim step first. Shouldn't the federal government understand that at least? And even if that is the first, you used to call it low-hanging fruit. If that is really what has to happen first, isn't that where all the efforts should go?
Well, that's what Joe Biden's announcement was, in October.
Right.
And basically, listen, nobody should be getting arrested for, cannabis small possession. Trafficking is a completely different issue.
Right.
To where the states are going in that direction. So decrim is very popular because so many people are consuming this product. The last thing they want is you get arrested for consuming it, but I don't.
Right.
And we're, a lot of local police forces are going through this now, to where, yes, it should be a given. No one should get arrested for this. And I think that's the first step. The second step is, should we be legalizing and what should it be looking like? But I think that first step is mostly universal, but there could be some, local jurisdictions out there that still want to arrest people for small possession, which is it's horrible.
Power and money seems to be the theme in the chat room right now on our YouTube channel. And Michael, you mentioned capitalism. Josh, you've been in this space for a lot longer than I have, for sure. How do you manage power and money? How do you manage it when there's such excitement about making money and there's an adrenaline rush to it? And is the capitalist system and cannabis just never going to be part of it? I don't know. I'm just throwing these words out there because I read it in the chat room.
Yeah, it's water and oil. How do you combine an altruistic perception with the realities of quote unquote evil capitalistic society? And they're butting heads against each other all of the time. And so ultimately you have to do it with the lobbyists. they're the middleman. They're the person who's going to get in the middle and be that moderator for your own sanity, because somebody has to deal with bureaucrats. I don't have the patience for it. People don't care or have the patience for it. So unfortunately, people try and vote over and over again, expecting a different result. And the reality is that the lobbyists are the ones making 20,000% for their corporate interests. And so if we as the individuals don't empower lobbyists, nothing's going to matter, because lobbyists ensure votes are never heard of or dealt with at the federal level. The local level is the only place I personally vote, because I'm boycotting the system at the federal level, because it's obvious to me that voting harder is a meme and voting over and over again is insanity. So until we as an individual can have a lobbyist that can get something done, I'm following Ice Cube and I'm holding my vote until I get paid.
Got to support me in my new effort, Josh. That's
there you
exactly
go.
what I want to be doing, getting support for the good. It is hard because a lot of people who got involved with the cannabis industry, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they wanted to do what was right and create companies and have people not getting arrested. And then at the same time, you're building up an industry, and that industry, you have to deal with labor laws, and you have to deal with all these other things that are related to capitalism and making money and paying bills. And sometimes that could butt heads. It would be great if we all just grew in our backyards and we had enough to consume and we traded with our friends. But on a grand scheme across markets, you need to get this product out. And what's the most efficient ways to get that product out to market? And that's where you come into taxes and rules and regulations and interstate commerce and all the things we're trying to get an advantage. And everything Josh is mentioning is about, those people trying to get advantages over your competitors and what they're willing to do versus, hey, we all want the same thing. How do we survive in this? And even if we had cannabis that was, good and pure and hopeful and small business and entrepreneurial, there would still be capitalism involved in those, because everyone wants to make an advantage. And like Josh said, getting paid, that's always going to drive people. I haven't gotten corrupted yet, Jimmy and Josh, and I still want to do the good thing. And so I still want to fight. I hope I can keep continuing to do this. I hope, when I announce my own lobby firm, that there's going to be a demand for representation and doing the right thing, and having a voice out there.
Well, we will continue to give you a platform to have that voice heard, Michael. How's that? That's the best thing I can do personally. I'm actually shocked to hear that Josh doesn't vote in federal elections, and he and I will talk about that off camera a little bit too, because it is your obligation as an American citizen, even though you have to sometimes hold your nose when you make
argue about it, because the only people who shouldn't complain are the ones who voted, because it's your fault. Until every bureaucrat wakes up and realizes we didn't vote, that's the only time anything will change. So let's argue about it.
All right, you got it. We're going to take a break before we argue about it, though, because it's past 4:20. We missed that. It's definitely time to take a little break. Michael, thank you so much for joining us again today. And let's talk off air, as they say, and figure out a way that we can continue to keep this going.
Hey, thanks, Jimmy. Josh, thanks again.
And we'll be back with more of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the floor of the CWCB Expo in the Javits Center in New York City.
This is really about the city. This is really about society. This is really about all the things that cannabis means to all of us.
One of the things we really have to do with the people that are in the industry is advocate more for the industry with non-industry people. We know education cuts across every part of society, whether it's talking to your kids, whether it's talking to people in high school, training college students, talking to people about hemp, that is part of your obligation, really.
There's a lot of education that goes into helping people understand what cannabis is. It's no longer, the devil's lettuce or anything like that, but it's a big real business. It's a big real industry.
That tells you that they know that this market, even though in its infancy, the legalized infancy, that there's a lot of opportunity because they need a bigger booth to accommodate the attendees. And you could hear the background. There's a lot of people here yesterday and today.
Can you explain what maize, M-A-I-Z-E, is?
Corn.
Oh, I love corn. Corn. We'll see you next Friday live on Green Rush. And welcome back to a Friday afternoon, really live edition of Green Rush. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. We like to talk about the business of cannabis on this show, and we've been doing it here during this time slot now for 3 years. And it's pretty amazing that we're still here. People are watching, they're chatting in our chat room, and we continue to get great guests, and that continues here in this next half hour. I can tell you at the top of the hour, we're going to have Bruce Barcott, the former editor of Leafly.com, who had been with that company for 7 years before that company decided to pull the plug on a lot of the marketing. So once again, another major player in the cannabis space is pulling the plug back and kind of reorganizing and shifting because of the downturn of the economy more than anything else. And joining us now is Jason Bello, and he is one who is, I believe, sitting on the shores of one of my favorite spots on earth. It's Sebago Lake in the great state of Maine. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
I love it up there. I know exactly. I can close my eyes and see Sebago in my memories because it really is a very special spot in the great state of Maine. And I'm jealous that you're up there. But you are doing something in Massachusetts next week. Tell us a little bit about this 2-day show that you're involved with, and what can we expect it's in Greenfield, Massachusetts, which is near the border of Vermont and New Hampshire, right? It's in the Massachusetts area, but it's just below New Hampshire and Vermont.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, northwest Massachusetts. Yeah. Right on the border of New Hampshire. But basically it's a 2-day event. The whole premise of the show is obviously consumption and sampling. And really it's a platform, for cannabis brands in Massachusetts to come show off their product and meet every retailer in the state in 2 days. So we've got, as of this morning, 86% of Massachusetts dispensaries are going to be in attendance. So yeah, really, I think it kind of is streamlining. As a cannabis operator, you want to meet obviously retailers and sell your product in their shops. So this is the most streamlined platform in which you can do that.
Now, and Josh Kincaid's with us from Washington State, and he lends a great perspective because his state was one of the first to legalize adult use in our country, and he also has a background in finance. So I got to ask the question about how you've got over 80% of the dispensaries represented at your show. Now, if I remember correctly, that's close to almost 200 dispensaries.
246 as of this morning we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So how did you get them all to agree to come in out in Greenfield? And it's a consumption event. So is it, obviously I'm going to guess it's outdoors, yes?
Mixed, mostly outdoor. I have 2 indoor buildings, but I mean, really to build this show, it had a slow start, and then it really ramped up once we started to get those key brands. But our philosophy hasn't changed internally. I mean, I have a really great team. Todd Bello, my cousin, he does retail relations, has called every store in Massachusetts 15 times. Joey Harold, who he used to be the former head of operations at Hall of Flowers, joined us to launch this show. Kai Brady does exhibitor sales. So my team has worked extremely hard to pull this thing off, and it really just took a lot of communicating with the with the operators in the state, and everybody's been very receptive and understands what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to really make this the 2 days on the calendar for Massachusetts operators.
I feel like this is what HempFest should have evolved into rather than what it's no longer. It's pretty much dead. But it's interesting you got a guy that's on your team from Hall of Flowers, because immediately I'm thinking this is a combination of Hall of Flowers and Interchange. So if you've ever heard of the Marijuana Venture magazine, they have Interchange, which is speed dating for retailers to meet those growers and manufacturers.
I'm familiar with that show.
Yeah, some of the audience members might not be, but they ring a bell every 20 minutes, and like speed dating, you get up, you move to the next team, and you do that. So maybe you can explain, because I think this is a phenomenal business opportunity. Because in my mind, I'm like, wow, are you handing out free samples like they kind of do at Hall of Flowers, or you buy tickets in advance? Is it open to the public? Is it business only? Like, how does that work with regulators? Kind of explain it a little bit, because it's fascinating.
Sampling and consumption approved from the booth. So if you're an exhibitor, you're allowed to bring product in. It follows possession laws. I've met with a bunch of people at the CCC, so they're fully aware of what we're doing. I've just a complicated system of keeping track of it. But basically, it's like Hall of Flowers, where you can sample from your booth. We don't have that dispensary model of getting a ticket. But yeah, I mean, that's it. It's really just exhibitors can sample from their booth. And
now, is it open to the public?
Not open to the public. So that it's business to business. It's very focused.
Okay. And how is it 10 to 4? What are the hours on next? It's Wednesday and Thursday next week, right? Yeah.
Thursday, June 14th to 15th. It's 10 to 5 each day.
Okay.
And your regulator, sorry, Jimmy, your regulator, because we've got an issue out here where a lot of the events are not making money because the regulators are coming in and saying there's no consumption, and if you advertise, you're going to get in trouble. So I'm interested to know, is your regulator on board with this, and are you having any pushback on advertising?
Mm-hmm. I have legal counsel. Frankly, there's no guidelines for the state really the only thing is, to a cannabis event, you can't sell tickets. So that's kind of the main thing of like a consumer show, but we're not a consumer show. It's a private event. We took a lot of precautions. And, I based this off of, like I said, Joey comes from Hall of Flowers. I was one of the first employees there too. And my dad founded the show with 2 other partners in 2017. So I've had a lot of experience of learning how that show's ran under within a state that has the cannabis event license. There's only a couple states that do. It's like that, Michigan. I think Washington might have some kind of framework, but I'm not sure. But Massachusetts has something coming along, and I hope this event sets the precedent for how they create that license, because we're basing our compliance and everything, the way we run our show, after Hall of Flowers and other great events that have consumption sampling, Kush Stock, etc.
Mm-hmm. Are we going to have music there?
Not live music, but there will be music throughout the venue. Night 1, Wednesday night, we have a block party, so there will be live music, DJs, and a performance in the Hawks and Reed, which is a bar attached to our venue.
Huh. Okay. Very cool. And the town of Greenfield embracing this.
They love it. Yeah. I mean, I've met with the chief of their city council. I've sat in on their city council meetings, but town is very open and liberal and loves it. Super artsy, cute, small town that I think is really gonna accept this community into it, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun for 2 days for everybody coming.
Yeah. And Josh, don't you want to see more of these? I mean, to me, I just think we've got to get past this. We've got, what about this is going to happen? What about DUIs and all this stuff? No, people are, for the most part, the people that are in the cannabis space are responsible users of the plant. They are. They know what it does to them. They've experimented many, many times, so they know how much they can take, what they can take, how they can take it. There's a lot of different, the people that end up using it and having an uncomfortable experience are those that aren't that experienced with it. You really need to have education. How much educational, is there going to be an educational area at your event at all? Or what, how are we going to teach people while we're at this event?
Yeah, I think that really as a trade show organizer, it's a very neutral stance amongst, I'm not picking to highlight one brand or the other. It's you come in and, fill your booth, and it's a very equitable space. So I think each brand is definitely going to do demos and show everything like out of their booth. And I think that's basically the opportunity that you experience. I would also say, while I totally agree with you, like, you need to educate and inform and do all of that for, people to understand the plant. My show kind of has like a macro level of like influence on the market, just because this is where, buyers come to do their purchasing, and buyers come to see who are the biggest players in the industry. And it really is going to affect, like, I think it's going to affect the purchasing patterns of a lot of stores in this upcoming year, just because you'll see a lot more marquee brands in the industry. So
who are the buyers, Jason? Because in Washington, we're not vertically integrated, and so the retailers are separate from the producer processors. So when you have these 243 or whatever retailers in this teeny town, I've never been there, I'm just assuming it's small. But if you have all these people there, how does that work? Like, who's the target audience? Why are they there? And who are they going to sell to if they're vertically integrated, or are they not? Like, who's the market for?
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, it's a unique state. I would just tell you too that, like, Massachusetts dispensaries, you can only have 3 stores per operator. So you see a lot of like mid upper level operators, like that have 3 retail stores and a couple of cultivations and have really good product. It's not really like, I guess, California, where you have like the upper echelon and then it's a race to the bottom. So you definitely like have a lot of strong brands. There are, many sole manufacturers that are big brands out here, like trying to sell to those dispensaries, but it's a mixture of all over. But either way, I think there's still a lot of room for, like, if you walk into a store in Pittsfield, Mass, or Cape Cod, or the North Shore, you're going to see totally different product. You know what I mean? You'll only see maybe 1 or 2 common brands, where frankly it should be a lot more.
I don't think of agriculture when I think of the Northeast. For some reason, I think of like lobster, but where I'm at, it's a lot of hops. Like, it's a hop central of the world in Yakima, which is central Washington. So when we do become federally legalized, what are you guys going to be known for? Is it going to be micro indoor grows? You guys going to do massive outdoor? Is it going to be hemp? Is it going to go away with federal legalization? Where do you see that segment making a lasting impression on the national scale?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think Jimmy will probably have something to say too, but I would just tell you that, like, the Berkshires historically is like the Emerald Triangle. It's kind of where everybody was growing in the old days, where it was illegal, and then they switched. There were a lot of indoor grows out there, but I think there's a mix of a lot of outdoor grows that are good, and I think that there's a lot of great indoor growers. Like, the Chemdog strain comes from the Berkshires, where we're holding the event. I would also say, I come from California, and worked on Hall of Flowers, so I've seen a lot of different product types out there. Concentrates are less apparent out here, and you see more beverages and edibles are more apparent out here. So I think it's a different type of consumer, and a little bit of a different, more unique type of product. But I think that might be its lasting impact.
Yeah.
Did you say your dad started Hall of Flowers?
Yeah, he started it, Eric Bello, with Danny Diamonstein and Aaron Levant. who they were
How did
both
he? Because that's pretty crazy, man. You grew up in one of the. I think I haven't been to Hall of Flowers in California. I've seen it at Vegas. I've lived vicariously through social media, and it seems like one of the most engaging conferences I've seen in 10 years, even though I haven't been there. But like people who go back, it's not like it's a one-off situation. It's not an anomaly. This is a thing where people are like, "Damn, I should have got more tickets." So, how did your dad start it? What was the influence in being a part of that and seeing it, man? What was your takeaways? Because that's pretty successful.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, for me, it was like the greatest crash course in trade shows that anybody could ever get ever, because I'd learned so much under such brilliant minds. But I would just tell you that, those three guys are just absolute legends in the trade show industry. And it was, anybody who saw him coming knew Hall of Flowers was going to be a success. I mean, my dad worked on Comdex, which was one of the biggest computer trade shows in the world. It became CES, and then he ended up running the Las Vegas Sands Convention Center, which owns hotels in Vegas and Macau, Singapore. Danny Diamonstein, he did Liberty Fair trade show, which is a clothing show that was a sub trade show of Magic. And then Aaron Levant, he did Agenda, which was a streetwear like hype fashion show, and then ended up running Complex Con for a few years. And then they all came together and made Hall of Flowers.
That's a crazy brainstorming session. I bet you they came up with some cool stuff they haven't even implemented yet. That sounds cool.
I'm
What
sure.
I'm hearing though is it's a maturation of a new industry. Everybody's looking for that angle that is unique to help the industry out, because there's a lot of backbiting in this industry right now in the Massachusetts area, and I don't like it. There has to be more of a community of working together and collaboration rather than competition. And yet competition is good for the economy because it makes you have the best product or offer the different types. And, so you have a variety of products on your shelves and that sort of thing. But I just wonder, everybody in one place, is everybody going to get along, you hope, Jason? I just hope everybody does, because I know there's some bad blood between some of these dispensaries in Massachusetts. I know that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a good thing in general just to have everyone together. And I think, a lot of I've been an operator before too, and like there's always just kind of rumors going around or anything in whether it be a personal thing or whether it be a business thing, but it's good for everybody to just be on the same level, like, and same within the same platform, and kind of just be together as a community. I think it'll foster good business relationships and personal. And then, I think we're doing sessions too, which is our speaker series that'll happen on day one. So it's a good opportunity for everyone to get together and kind of hear from some of the most experienced people in the industry. We have some top CEOs and industry executives there. But I think it's going to be a good thing. I think it's going to be a really good thing to have everyone under one roof.
All the more reason for me to cover it for We Talk News too, which is another reason why I'll be going out there. And one of these days, people in the industry, Josh, I've told you about Massachusetts, right? That out of all the people, all the states that watch us, it's great. California, Texas, Michigan, Florida, New York, Massachusetts is 14th. And I'm really trying to make myself more visible in my own backyard and getting out to these more of the Bay State area events so that people can find out what we're doing here, because we have a national following now. It's bizarre to me. I'm proud of it. I'm amazed. When I went to New York last week, people were stopping me and hugging me and taking pictures. I mean, Jason, you don't know this, but I was a sportscaster for 30 years. So I was a public figure in New England, in Portland, Maine, and in Boston. But I never expected to see the same kind of adulation, if you will, in cannabis. For me, come on. I mean, I didn't know. I'm just talking about it because I'm fascinated with the industry. I'm fascinated with the stories. I'm amazed at the depth of the science and the chemistry and the research and the botany and all the different ancillary companies that are involved with this industry. And when I and I'm looking forward to seeing it, because I really think more people need to understand that we have to, this is not going away. This plant is not going away. It changes people's lives. It saves people's lives. It's here to stay. Don't look at it as an evil thing. Look at it as an interesting thing. There's so much research out there. When Bruce Barcott joins us in a few moments, he'll tell stories that blow my mind when I hear stories about those that have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs are still being victimized by regulations and by the stigma that's out there. And Josh, while you talk about legalization, I think ultimately it's going to happen, but that involves politicians and lawyers. And that means it's going to take a long time for that to happen. I want people to get to normalization. I want people to accept the fact, you know what, let me find out about this product. Maybe it can help me with my sleep. Maybe it can help me with my anxiety. Maybe it can help me with my aches and pains and arthritis that a lot of people have. And Josh, I thought at the beginning of the show, when you brought up caffeine, 91% of Americans have a cup of coffee every day.
It's more consumed than water in the US.
Right. And caffeine is an addictive, psychoactive chemical. And yet we've accepted it as part of our world, right? We have.
More than that, businesses will actually give you a leeway and be like, oh, you haven't had your cup of coffee yet. I understand why you made that mistake. Like if you were like, oh, I'm hungover, then there's no error there, no leeway. But they'll give you leeway, be like, oh, I can't talk to you. I've had my first cup of coffee. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughs. Like that's dependency at its core. So I don't know. I see people traveling 6 hours away in state to go to an event. I wonder if, Jason, you're going to be bringing this to other places, because if it's as popular with interchange coming from a place like Spokane to Seattle, which is 6 hours away, which is like half a dozen states in the East Coast that you'd have to drive through to get there. It makes sense that people want to do this. It's that important. And although the festivities have become less fun and more business-like throughout the years, it's still around. Whereas a lot of other stuff is not around. CannaCon doesn't come around. HempFest isn't here. A lot of stuff is dead in the Northwest. Do you plan on bringing your event to the nation, or are you going to stick to where you're at in the Northeast?
Yeah, I just I believe in like giving something your all, your 100%. And right now I'm so narrowly focused on making this show a success that I'm not sure yet. But I would just say, like, even as Jimmy, you were just saying, like, we're so early in the industry that if this were the computer industry, they only just made Pong. It's super, super early. So I think, it's no question I'd probably want to expand if this goes well, but for now I'm focused on making sure next week is a smash success, which I think it will be.
All right. Well, look, Jason, I wish you the best. How do you have a website? Give a plug to your website.
Just theflowerexpo.com. Take a visit. Our events next week, June 14 to 15. And my guest that's coming up at 5 needs the link, Dan, and it's Bruce Barcott is his name. And I'll tell you what his email is in the break. But we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have Bruce. We'll connect with Bruce. But Jason, I will see you Wednesday next week in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And it will be my first trip to Greenfield, Massachusetts. So I'm not sure if that's a news story or not, but we'll make it one for sure. All right. Thank you and good luck. We're going to come back with more after this. Don't go away.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I. All right, welcome back to the final hour of Green Rush Live here on a Friday afternoon on Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every Friday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, which thankfully I figured out Pacific Time is 3 hours earlier so that I can actually reach out to some people we know on the West Coast, like Josh Kincaid out in Washington State. And now we're bringing in somebody else from Washington State. His name is Bruce Barcott, and he is I guess I have to call you a former editor of Leafly.com. Is that where we're at right now, Bruce?
That's where we're at, Jimmy. Yeah, absolutely. I am footloose and fancy free now after 7 good years at Leafly.
Yeah, and you did a great job. I mean, I'm a big fan. I've read the book, Weed the People, and I actually have it as required reading for people who want to learn about the space that we're in now. Bruce, as you look back at those 7 years and you look back at Washington State, there's a lot of doom and gloom and reality going on right now in the cannabis space. We just spent a lot of time with Michael Corriea from Washington, D.C., and talking a lot about the challenges of getting any kind of federal reform. Are you amazed that we're still growing at this point? I mean, you'd think the Green Rush happened early. There was Cannabis 1.0 and then there was 2.0. And are we at like 3.0 yet? Or are we still kind of trying to get through the 2.0?
I think, honestly, we're still trying to get through the 2.0. I think of 1.0 as being, really what do we want to say, 2014 through 2021, maybe, with a little ancillary boost from the pandemic. But I do think we're in a settling period, a falling out period right now, where a lot of the hope and over exuberance that went into the cannabis legalization movement, and then the industry, and rightly so, for so many reasons, has settled down. And I think that a lot of people for many, many years, viewed cannabis as the next tech in terms of the financial possibilities there, in terms of people coming in and, making $1 billion with a B. And, we can go in many directions talking about that, but I think the reality is that, and people are seeing this now, is that it is a hard business to turn a buck in. There's parts of this that are agriculture. There's parts of this that are just plain retail. And it doesn't, scale in the way that Facebook might scale. You still have to sell a person a joint or a gram or an ounce face to face,
Right. Oh no, absolutely. And we were talking about earlier is I think the government, both at the federal, state, and town level, have done an amazing job of putting so many elements and levels in to really test the passion and commitment of the industry and try to do everything they possibly can to either break the industry or really thin the herd before it even becomes a herd.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen play out is there's this great tension between the MSOs, the large players who have stores and operations in many states across the U.S., versus the local players, the local people who are trying to get up a small farm, who are trying to get up a single retail store, and there's a way in which many governments are trying to build in opportunities for small operators, for entrepreneurs, especially people of color who have been harmed by the war on drugs, this sort of thing. But there's a way in which also those efforts are being undermined by the overzealousness of a lot of the rules that are going in on the state level and a local level. Essentially, we see this most commonly with the so-called opt-out towns that don't allow any businesses in their district. But also, the onerousness of a lot of state regulations, and then the simple fact of taxes, of that IRS rule that just slays any notion of profit every year. It's a tough one.
So Bruce, with that, you're talking about 280E, I'm assuming, not being able to write off stuff. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, like last night, I saw something about the banking act, or safe banking in DC getting, I forget what the term is, it got pushed up or whatever, and it's the first time in a while that anything has been given that kind of priority, which indicates, I guess, a significant drive or interest in order to get something done, not just placating the audience, but like truly trying to get something done. So between banking, and this is a three-part choose your own solution here.
All right.
What's going to be the biggest drive for the industry? Is it going to be 280E that you just mentioned with taxes? Is it going to be banking, or is it going to be interstate commerce?
Oh, I know the answer.
Oh, you know the answer, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah.
I think if you asked me to pick one, let's say, right? I have a choice of three, and I can pick one. Honestly, I would pick interstate commerce.
Yep.
I really would.
We are the United States of America, after all, right? Yeah.
Yeah. This artificial bordering of states that we do, and forcing people to grow cannabis in New Jersey, while at the same time, Oregon is just like drowning in cannabis plants, and California to a certain extent as well. I think that really could even things out quite a bit and help right the ship in terms of making the national cannabis industry a more logical industry, where people who have the resources to grow and the sunshine and the soil can grow and just go bananas, and then put it on a truck and ship it across the country.
Right.
I think it's held back the industry a lot in terms of how COVID sped up the global landscape about 10 years for a lot of things, specifically in our industry, delivery, e-commerce, things of that nature. Like it sped up a lot. And hopefully that'll kind of continue in that direction. Is there anything that you see that could propel that any quicker?
I'm not sure, because I think that for the last 2 years, until the House turned over to Republicans, there was this great hope that at least safe banking would pass, if not full federal legalization. And then, when nothing happened and the House went over to the Republicans, and I really don't expect anything to come out of the House in a positive way in terms of drug reform or cannabis legal reform. I think there's a sort of a feeling of retrenchment and a feeling that, okay, this is kind of what we're set with, I think, for the next couple of years, and we're going to have to work within these guidelines. And unfortunately, that has led to other sort of ancillary repercussions. That realization, I think, scared a lot of investment money away, which has made it much harder for a number of companies to, either stay afloat and make payroll, or just to get started. There's not that kind of crazy money available that we saw 4, 5, 6 years ago.
And I think it's interesting because the whole movement was designed to legalize and get rid of the illicit market, okay, or at least minimize it. And it has had the exact opposite effect because of the bureaucracy, because of these issues. And it's also another reason why I think you're starting to see states making deals with each other out there on the West Coast for interstate commerce. It's like, why do we need to wait around if you're out in Oregon, Washington, and California? Let's just share what we have out here on the West Coast. And again, it makes sense in business, but is it hurting the legalization movement? Is it hurting the reform movement? I guess is the question I have for you, Bruce.
I don't think the idea of interstate commerce and the fact that these states are moving ahead in theory, if not in practice.
Right.
I think it's having the exact opposite effect. I think that, again, for many years, there was the assumption that, the states are the nursery, the cradle of new projects in democracy. And we're trying out legalization, and eventually that'll burble up to the federal level, and Congress will naturally pass Legalization Act and things will be better. It hasn't happened. I think interstate commerce could be the next step that states have to take on their own, sort of pushing past the existing line to make progress happen. And I'm not sure how that will happen. It could be, back in 2013, after Colorado and Washington legalized, there were a lot of delicate negotiations or delicate talks that went on between Washington, Colorado, their state, essentially governors, and the Obama administration. How are we going to handle this? Because it's still definitely federally illegal. And so the Justice Department essentially came out with a memo that said, all right, we're going to let you proceed with this, but here's the line. You can proceed, but don't go past these lines. I think something similar might, help propel a little more progress in terms of interstate commerce, in terms of let's say Washington, Oregon, and California got together and presented something to the Department of Justice and said, hey, look, we have a real problem with the illicit market. This is one way we think that could really give us a strong tool to combat that illicit market. Let's just lower the barriers between those state lines, the Columbia River, and then, that line in California that I don't know is geographically marked, but it's there. I don't know. That's what I think about interstate commerce. I'm very excited about the possibilities there.
Yeah, just like COVID slowed everything or sped some stuff up, I think that also interstate commerce could do the same thing. If we look at if the dormant commerce clause was used to allow for interstate commerce, we could have the equivalent of incubators and think tanks and focus groups and all of these people coming together to brainstorm on because you've got some people in states that are saying we've got fire, and then you look at it and like, man, that's a meme right there. That's poop soup in a jar. What are you doing? If we could get rid of the barriers and these ridiculous state borders and actually allow for a single cannabis cup where all of these innovators could come through, we could have some really, really good cannabis and maybe allow for Blue Dream to come back because it's not a high yield or it goes into the rainy months or whatever. And so they base these cultivars or strains on what's going to be a higher yield. And I don't want to pick my choice based on the farmer making the most money. I want to pick it based on what terpene profile works best for me. And I think that having an open interstate commerce will allow people to come together, figure out what's the best way to do it, where and how, and then network like a true co-op to be able to produce the best. There's a guy running around with a sweatshirt said the weed's supposed to taste good. Like that. It's a meme. It's almost funny that he has to wear that on a shirt, but it's standard. It should be good. And I believe that interstate commerce could be that thing to really kind of bring everybody together to have that connoisseur cannabis that we all deserve.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was a perennial challenge when I was editing it at Leafly was the fact that we wanted to get information about the best products to our readers. That was like goal number one. People need more information about what they're buying or what they could buy, what's good and what's not good. One of the huge challenges and frustrations was that because the industry is so fragmented state to state, you could write about what's amazing in California right now. And people just across the border, I mean, in Oregon, I mean, obviously, if you're just across the border, you can drive. But, people on the West Coast will be like, wow, that sounds amazing. How can I get it? Well, you can't. You got to go to California to get it. Or, likewise in Massachusetts, if they got some new product in Massachusetts and we're raving about it, you can only still obtain it in Massachusetts, even though there are, obviously companies and brands that move state to state now, and not all of them do. But
like the hash strips in Canada, we can rip a piece of hash and put it in your joint, but you can't get it here like that.
Right. Well, whatever it is, like it is a real problem, and it's something that I can't think of another industry that faces that.
That's right. That's right. No, it's so unique, guys. We all know that. But one of the things we talk about interstate commerce, and this is one of the things that is a bit hypocritical because there is already interstate commerce in the cannabis industry. People are using they're manufacturing, the genetics are coming across state lines, whether they be seeds, they're turning it into concentrates, they're turning it into edibles. It's the same recipe in California as it is in Massachusetts, as it is in Michigan. This is happening. They're replicating the same product in other states. So, but what's hurting is the fact that flower can't be across state lines, right? So once again, the enlightenment of our government needs to happen because they have to understand that there's already interstate commerce going on. And by the way, you feds aren't getting a piece of this yet.
Yeah, that's the FOMO we should be sending is like, you're missing out on some money. If you can ship seeds, how come I can't ship a clone or a seedling of a plant? It makes no sense.
No
and then
sense.
You go all the way to the end with the finished product. Like, what's the difference?
That's exactly right. Hey, Bruce, I'm going to tell you something. There was an article, you pointed out a great article, and I want to get to that in a minute. But in Massachusetts, the Talking Joints memo produced by Chris Ferrone put out a interesting memo, or I guess it was an article this week, on the testing, the inconsistencies of testing, and some of the, let's just say, less than legal activities that go on between the testing labs and the producers of the product to enhance those testing results. You guys at Leafly, I'll never forget, you went and you tested different products and you kind of reported on it. It was a great expose. once again, it's part of the learning process about how delicate the plant's makeup is. You can't, you use the word clone, Josh. You can't clone cannabis. You just can't. It impacts everybody differently. And every time that a batch is tested out of this area, let's just say, it's not going to be the same as being tested out of this area. And by the way, our regulators and our legislatures all want it to be clean and make sure we don't have mold. And I as a consumer, I don't want to have mold in it either, by the way. Not that I even knew what mold was back in the 70s or the 80s, but I didn't care back then. I was just happy to get it then. Now you can clean it up.
You didn't like the mold on those stems you were smoking, huh, Jimmy?
That's right. That's right. That's right. No, we used to. I take the
with the fire. You've got 100% mold now, whether it's indoor or outdoor. Those mold spores are going through every single filter in everywhere. So everyone in the Northeast has got mold now. Yeah. And we figured that out, Bruce. You remember 2017 when the Eastern Oregon fires were blowing through, and then people were getting popped, and they're like, "What's going on?" And I think you guys probably wrote on that, and we're like, it's the fires pushing the mold spores through, creating havoc for everybody. And then they just go mold to gold. We're going to blast this. And then now you can dab it safely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lab shopping has been a problem. You know, that's a problem that cropped up early here in Washington State, with folks going lab to lab and see who can, result the highest THC level, because that's the biggest bang for the buck the consumer wanted. There's the classic two-prong attack on that. One is simply to continue to educate consumers that it's not all about the THC. It's about so many other things that go into the experience. But I think there's also a way in which I think when we all started up these regulations and these industrial systems, we thought that we think of labs as being sort of angelic players in the system, where of course they wouldn't pipe their results. They're decent folk. They're scientists.
They're robots.
And we learned early on that no, actually, like there's a profit motive involved here, and that can really skew things. And I've seen some reports in the last year where folks are advertising THC percentages in the 40s and such, and I'm like, I'm not sure what you're doing to a plant to pump it up to THC in the 40s or 50s, but that's no longer a plant. There's no room for cellulose anymore. Like what is going on there? That's not working. So yeah, it is an issue, and I think that again, it's so early in terms of consumer knowledge about these products.
That's right.
And has been, we've had a forced ignorance about it for 85 years of prohibition,
Right. And let's educate some of our consumers. You can go into a dispensary, you can look and see what has the highest percentage of THC, and you can make your buy, because that's what's been going on now. But we all know, those that have, been around it and talked to scientists and growers and everything, it is the terpene profile that dictates the impact of that THC and the other cannabinoids in the plant. And that is probably more important than the percentage of THC. But people are looking, I want to get the best stuff to get the best high. Well, maybe that's not what you should be looking for. You want to get the best result of what you're looking for this plant to do for you.
And you wouldn't want to get on a motorcycle going 1,000 miles an hour without a steering wheel, and terpenes are the steering wheel. So you're going to get somewhere fast, but how do you know where you're going to go?
Yeah.
Bruce, why is it in Washington State, when I go to my local dispensary, or no matter where it is, how come they don't have terpenes yet? You go to Nevada, a relatively recent state, and they buy a lot of stuff based on terpenes. And yet in Washington, they give me happy, relaxed, or THC based on the lowest price, so I could filter on price and filter on THC. Why, after so long, is a state like Washington falling behind?
I think that's one where, that's got to be essentially consumer driven. I really do think that's got to come from consumers demanding to know about terpenes, about the terpene profile of the product they're buying. I don't want to sit here with a hammer and bang on our local alcohol control board in Washington State, but our regulators do their best, but they have never really been set up to regulate cannabis proactively. I mean, they were from the start an alcohol regulatory body. That's what they do well. And they really, I think with cannabis, they're all about, enforcing age minimums, which they should. They're all about, enforcing some other things, but really they don't get involved in demanding that testing labs, give a terpene profile with every run they do. And so I think that unless that comes from the consumer telling the bud tender, telling the retailer, hey, I want to know more about what you got going on here, it's not going to happen. I mean, look, we've been trying to get homegrown rules relaxed here in Washington for years. Like we have pretty, we got higher priorities at a certain point when it comes to regulations and the state legislature. So yeah, I don't know. I think again, it's a consumer demand kind of thing. And we, at Leafly, we tried many different ways of talking about terpenes. But I think the industry still has a long way to go in terms of coming up with a language to talk about terpenes and the experience and connecting those things. Right. Because it just, we don't have the words yet, Right.
Hey,
I think John Kingsbury is going to finally overturn that felony on home grow this year in Washington. So I think that bill is going to be received fairly well if they don't approve it this year, hopefully next year.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Hey. I mean, look, just to cap that thought. I mean, I like beer. I'm not a beer connoisseur, but there's a craze, at least in my corner of the country, for hazy IPAs, right? Juicy, hazy IPAs. And those are very blunt terms, but they're the words that I use when I go and look for that specific product right now. It would probably embarrass somebody who's actually knows something about beer, but I'm a very mainstream connoisseur, and I think we need simpler terms and more powerful terms to describe terpenes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, by the way, malemoline, just pronouncing them is a challenge, let alone spelling them. You guys are both from Washington State, and we haven't even talked about, wasn't there a news item this week about one of the Tri-Cities opting in to cannabis now? Is it Pasco, Washington? Is that a city in Washington? Okay, so that's in our news show. It's on at 6 o'clock. I just want you to know I spotted it. They are now, so a lot of states, when they go legal, allow the local towns to opt in or opt out of whether they want to have dispensaries in their town. It isn't tied to the actual vote for that particular ballot question or anything like that. And in Washington State, that city, Pasco, has decided to opt in to the cannabis dispensaries. And that was a pretty big deal. I thought that, because if you look at New York, a lot of the towns, once they go legal, they go, no, not in our town. It's the NIMBY factor, right, guys? Isn't that what they call it? The NIMBY factor?
Not in my backyard.
Yeah. And right, not in my backyard. And yet here in Washington State, when I'm looking at that and I say, oh, maybe this is a trend, maybe the new market in New Jersey, those that have opted out will now start to opt in. More and more towns in Massachusetts now are looking at the taxes that are generated in the various towns that are.
That's the thing you got to focus on, because you're making it sound like they pulled their head out of their ass in Pasco, and they didn't. What happened was, I believe, is that they were incentivized because A, they weren't going to get the money, and B, I think they're literally paying up to $2.5 million. Don't quote me on that, to opt in. So Bruce can maybe give us more info.
I am out of the loop on the Pasco.
Not covering the beat anymore. It's not his beat anymore. I did it. I found it. Hey, this is big. Give me credit for that. Props.
Pasco's
We Talk News had this story.
But here's the thing: Pasco's a teeny town, but it is conservative country, because it's all about farming and everything. So that's a big deal, because they have There's a thing called Red Mountain in Eastern Washington, and it has a wine mafia. I use the term loosely, and they don't want cannabis anywhere. And so they use that NIMBY, the not in my backyard thing, to push people out and say cows, or cannabis stinks. Not the cow shit that's everywhere, but the cannabis. And so it's hilarious. It's hilarious. They're using anything they can out in Pasco, but the fact that this conservative area of Pasco is saying yes is huge news at a very, very teeny local level, because it's just saying, hey, it's acceptable, it's money, let's do it, who cares, nobody's pushing back. So all of those things at the heart of the country in middle America is going to start expanding, and there's going to be a lot of people going, damn, I didn't think that Utah would have it, or we're in Washington State, and Ferndale up north and a couple other places don't serve alcohol on Sundays, but they'll have cannabis. So there's some of these areas that are opting in, that don't like alcohol, that are saying yes to cannabis. And that's the takeaway, is that nobody's pushing back because no one cares.
Right. We had a viewer from Utah in the chat room earlier today too. So it just gives you an idea. We've got that kind of reach. Hey, Bruce, I love talking to you. I really do. I don't care if you're not on the beat anymore. You have such a great perspective on this industry and the history of it. And I so appreciate you coming on today. And I really hope we get a chance to continue this, because I've always enjoyed your work.
Absolutely. I love talking with you, Jimmy. And I love talking cannabis. Like, honestly, 10 years ago, I got in on this sort of fell into it when, Washington legalized, and I happened to live in Washington, and I looked around and said, what the hell's going on here? And, the more I did my research and wrote my book, the more I just love covering this subject and thinking about it and writing about it. There's so many different just aspects of life that get teased out of this. We were talking the other day, you and me, and everything from, how cannabis affects sleep, to the idea of stigma, and the social racial history of the United States gets so entwined with all of this. I really love it. I can't get enough of it.
There you go. Well, let's stay tuned to Pro Cannabis Media, because hopefully 2023 is the year that the rest of the country picks up on what we're doing here, and share, like, and subscribe to everybody. That's what we want. Bruce Barcott, thank you again. We will keep in touch, and I'm looking forward to the next book that comes out.
Awesome. Great talking with you both.
You bet. Last half hour, Green Rush Live coming up next. Don't go away. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the floor of the CWCB Expo in the Javits Center in New York City.
This is really about the city. This is really about society. This is really about all the things that cannabis means to all of us.
One of the things we really have to do with the people that are in the industry is advocate more for the industry with non-industry people. We know education cuts across every part of society, whether it's talking to your kids, whether it's talking to people in high school, training college students, talking to people about hemp. That is part of your obligation, really.
There's a lot of education that goes into helping people understand what cannabis is. It's no longer, the devil's lettuce or anything like that, but it's a big, real business. It's a big, real industry.
That tells you that they know that this market, even though in its infancy, the legalized infancy, that there's a lot of opportunity, because they need a bigger booth to accommodate the attendees. And you can hear the background. There's a lot of people here yesterday and today.
Can you explain what maize, M-A-I-Z-E, is?
Corn.
Oh, I love corn. Corn. We'll see you next Friday live on Green Rush.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com. Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
And welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our regularly scheduled business of cannabis talk show that we do here on Pro Cannabis Media from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time every week. We love when we can get our Pacific Coast time people involved with us. We love to connect both coasts, and Josh Kincaid is with us from Washington State. He hosts the Talking Hedge podcast that is pretty regular, isn't it, Josh? I mean, you do them. How many a week do you do, Josh?
I post 5 shorts, 60 seconds or less, one a day. And then I'm only doing one now, Jimmy. I'm cutting way back. 5th and final season of the Talking Hedge. Then my next live is Tuesday next week. But I'm really cutting back. So I don't do 5 a week anymore, but it's still a lot of content out there.
All right. And speaking of content and content creators and contributors, right now I think I see your hand over the lens, but Jill Goldsberry, who is our New Jersey correspondent for We Talk News, was talking with us just a matter of seconds ago.
It's frozen. Yeah, she's frozen.
She is frozen. So if she can still hear us, she should log out, log back in, and get back in the room. But we'll talk. Josh, out of the conversations that we've had over the last 90 minutes, there's been some really in-depth conversations at a very, I hate to use the word high level, if you will. What are some of the things that you've picked up on from Michael Corriea, or even from Jason Bello from the flower trade show guy, or even Bruce Barcott over the last 90 minutes?
Yeah, it just kind of shows me that the industry is normalizing where layoffs are normal. People are trying to expand and do things like Jason is moving from California to the Northeast and expanding and bringing his experience. I think that's phenomenal. That's great. But learning that Bruce got laid off and Michael got laid off is not surprising, whether it's a nonprofit or a publicly traded company. I think that times are tough and that there's going to be more layoffs and cutbacks and things of that nature, where consumers are doing the same thing. Businesses are no different. And so really the kind of takeaway for me is that this industry is normalizing. And I feel like MSO importance is kind of coming down. That multi-state operator is not as important. It's not that big buzz that it was, where we're trying to start to look at the local level. Like in the last segment, Jason was talking about the Northeast and events and how important that's going to be, or Michael was talking about local levels of, whether it's Oregon or Oklahoma or California that have access, and what's going to happen with those distressed areas and how that might turn over if we have interstate commerce that we mentioned with Bruce Barcott. All of these kind of things are opportunities for that industry to kind of expand and normalize into an everyday agriculture or normal product that you can or should be able to go out and consistently get, is what I'm hoping in the end that we can kind of normalize it, go out and get the same thing consistently. There's these great edibles. We were talking about terpenes last time. Swift is this brand name that have THC and CBD, but they also have equal parts of CBN and CBG. And so CBG is great for inflammation, just kind of like CBD, but CBN is great for nighttime. And so when you get all of those and you get them all at the same time, a friend of mine has a double lung collapse. And so I'm trying to find these for him, and it's hard to find, and he can't move. And it's really painful for him. So I would love to be able to find those consistently. And so I just made my store. We have 1,800 SKUs, so I can understand how maybe they forget to reorder or whatever. It's one of the annoying parts of being in Washington State is having too many options where the software doesn't work or people aren't checking the bins or whatever. So hopefully in the end, it'll be even more normal and you can get your stuff consistently without waiting.
And I think we've got Jill back. Hi, Jill. Uh-oh, we can't hear you now. Now we can't hear you. So talk to Dan and we'll figure out the technology here. She's muted now, so maybe she needs to unmute and then we can get her to talk to us. I mean, you know, it is. Still can't hear you, Jill. We were talking to her though before the show. I mean, we were ready to go.
No, that's how it works.
Oh wait, I got you. We got you.
Okay.
I got you. Jill, you're from New Jersey. Hey,
Yes.
we were talking about New Jersey, so I'm really glad that you're back with us and you can share with us, because in New Jersey, that market is evolving. It's really starting to pick up. You know, not only did you have Curaleaf going in and then coming back in and again, but you now have opened up some new dispensaries, and now other people are getting chances to open up in the New Jersey area. And I understand that there was also some awards in New Jersey last night, the first awards for the market in the cannabis space. Why don't you walk us through what that's all about and tell us what's going on? Go ahead.
Definitely. Yes. And New Jersey is definitely exploding right now in the cannabis scene. Last night, this was actually, I believe this was the second, the New Jersey Cannabis Insiders Awards. It was last night in Carteret, New Jersey. If you know anything about New Jersey, you'll know.
What exit? Oh, sorry.
I don't know what exit it is, but it's out there. It's past Oradell. I know that much.
Okay.
It's not a place I frequent. But yeah, it was at the Cataract Arts Center. It was a big gala, you know, very, you know, festive. You know, I'm kind of dressed festive for the, you know, award season commentary, you know. So yeah, they had a lot of awards they gave out, like Excellence in Cannabis Law, that went to Alana Hans Cohen of Poshman Stein, who's also been named Insider New Jersey's top 100 cannabis on the power list there as here as well. She's also very familiar with minority and women-owned businesses and social equity. So she's definitely someone to seek out if you are looking to, you know, for an attorney. You know, there were a lot of
like the best dispensary. Do you have like the best grower, anything like that? What do you got? What are the other categories?
exciting awards that we want to know in New Jersey. Okay, some of our New Jersey natives, winner in production and innovation. I'll give you the list of nominees though, just so you have an idea of the type of nominees. AYR Wellness, Block, Butter Cake, which is a brand that a delivery service and edible brand, Canna Spyglass, Future Ethogenic Medicines, and Miss Grass, who's also you know, very familiar with her and her products. So the winner was Butter Cake by woman-owned company CEO Martha Figaro. She's out of Jersey City, actually, and she's also part of.
I think I've heard of it. Yeah,
you probably have. She's all over the conventions. I know she was at MJM Biz, and you know she's out there, and she's also part of our BCB Masterminds cohort as well. So shout out to them. Congratulations to Martha. Excellence in social equity, that went to Hoffman Centers. That's Michael Hoffman. He's an attorney who focuses on social equity and expungement. Minority business owner of the year. There were several categories there. Roll Up Life, who you may have heard about. They've been having some issues in New Jersey recently. Simply Pure, that's Tahir Johnson. Canpowerment, and Blaze Responsibly. Blaze Responsibly wound up being the winner there. And you can find them on Instagram. You can see they've got pictures of their win and they're on stage and everything. It was a big night. It was a big night for them.
So let's talk a little bit about the overall scene of cannabis in New Jersey these days. I want to ask about the media because that's my baby, obviously.
Yeah.
Is cannabis being followed by traditional media? Did anybody cover that event? Was like NJ.com there? Were any of the TV networks there? Anything like that?
Well, I know this was NJ.com's event, so they were definitely
so they covered it, obviously.
Yeah, they were definitely. I did not see as much coverage from the mainstream publications yet or media, but I'm sure we'll see something sooner or later.
Yeah.
Probably the next day or so we'll hear more about that, because some of these companies are pretty well known in the industry and in the States. Like our friend Jill Cohen, she won best CBD dispensary.
All right. Yay. Congrats, Jill.
Jill.
Dan knows Jill. Jill. Absolutely.
Over in Maplewood. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Good for her. I love the passion of the people that are in this industry now, that the business owners, everybody's in it together. We all know the challenges of this industry. And if you can make it in any kind of acclamation or being recognized by your peers, it's worth, it helps ease the other stuff that goes on, like, can we pay our bills? Are we paying our bills? That sort of thing. And it's really been challenging out there.
So for those of us on the West Coast, what is NJ? I'm looking at the New Jersey Cannabis Insider 2023 awards from NJ.com, but what is NJ?
NJ.com is a umbrella of New Jersey media. It's NJ.com. It includes like NorthJersey.com, all the little.
Is this state owned, non-cannabis related?
No, it's non-cannabis related, but they have a cannabis portion that they started to cover all of New Jersey cannabis.
Yeah.
And it's by the state. Is that right?
Yeah, it's by the state.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's not, this isn't like a cannabis guy who's like, oh, I'm just going to, or girl, whatever. Like,
no.
This is like the state doing this. That's
it's
pretty unique.
It's actually part of NJ.com. And shout out to their, editor, Jelani Gibson for, hooking up all the information I needed for today. I appreciate that. So, yeah.
Was this a revenue play, or are they really interested in doing it? Because they only waited 14 months, because the first sales in New Jersey were 4/21 of last year. So barely a year, not a whole lot to really give awards based on. So are they running out as like, we truly want to like have New Jersey be this cannabis thing, or are they like, maybe we can make some money off of it? What was your take?
I think it's a little bit of both, because it is subscription based. There are articles that you can read, but the more important articles that you're going to want to read, there's a subscription, there's a paywall for that. So yeah, there's a revenue portion, but there's also an informative portion. They host events around New Jersey that are informative. They get cannabis entrepreneurs together with various events. So yeah, there's definitely an educational aspect, there's an entrepreneurial aspect, and yes, of course, a revenue aspect as well.
But were the winners, seem to be like the appropriate winners, or did you see some people who were like, oh, they happen to be the sponsor? I wonder if that was a pay to play system like all the other award systems. Did you feel like they were deserving?
I can't speak for the law firms, but the people that I know personally that did win, I believe they are very well deserving of that, because I know that they've been going at it for a while. They've, dotted all their I's, crossed all their T's. They've done everything they need to do to be compliant and be in that space. So yeah, I think that mostly everyone has been well deserving in their award.
Yeah, except for the accounting one, because Accounting Buds should have won, okay? For the best cannabis accountant service in New Jersey. Our pal Rick Leneve should have won, okay? But you know what? Avis tries harder too. Remember that saying, right? Sometimes you have to try harder to get to the top of the mountain. And That's good. I want to make sure I give them a shout out because, a big accounting firm won, big deal. They have more employees, it's a popularity. You could vote 1,000,000 times, Josh.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know it's popular contest. That's the worst
Yeah.
part about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I voted once, I'll admit. Okay. I voted once for Rick. But, I like to do things the right way as opposed to the wrong, whatever. Hey,
Guess
Jill,
who
go
won- Guess who
ahead.
won recreational dispensary of the year?
Who's that? Oh,
That you'll never believe it. It was a apothecarium dispensary in Maplewood also. So Maplewood's sweeping up awards here.
all right. Hey, guess who just joined us? Guess who's coming to dinner?
Hi, Lavana.
And there she is. That's Lavana Nassau. She is a San Francisco-based media person that's now living on the East Coast. We don't need to tell people that, but we're really hoping that Lavana is going to end up being our California correspondent. I met her last week at CWCB, and I'm so excited that she finally figured out how to get in. So Lavana, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, you're welcome. That was a comical amount of Chevy Chase mistakes as I made to get in the suit. For having me there. Apologies for being so late.
No, that's all right. It means you only get 10 minutes, but we'll be happy to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about who you are, what you've built out there in San Fran, and someone who has a tremendous amount of experience working in that California market, which, as we all know, is the number one market in so many categories, including the one that is the most messed up. I'm sorry to say, right? I mean, because it's big and it's messed up. How did that happen in California? If you have all the money in the world and everybody's into it, and the California is one of the biggest states, if not the biggest state outside of New York, in the country, how did it get screwed up? Is my question.
The Colorado market was the first legal market, and that was the testing ground for the entire country. But it's such an incomparable population and demographic to California being so big, seventh largest economy in the world. California, is the biggest supplier of cannabis and was, I don't know who I may maintain that, but New York, where we met, is the biggest consumer market in the world. It's,
right.
Not necessarily in the context of cannabis, the biggest market in the world. And New York was already, before legalization, the biggest market in the world. But yes, we have 20 million acres of farmland. We have a 20-year legal, meaning medical, culture and market existing. And so there was a combination of things. I mean, the factors to why, but I think last year at the CWCB Expo, in terms of like the success of the recreational market, the black market was already going strong, and a lot of the people that are now considered black market or whatever were just doing what they were doing on the legal medical market beforehand, became the black market because of regulations and whatnot. And I don't know, what happened in other states, but in California, it was definitely, from my experience from day one, being inside working in, I was working from day one in legal, going through the transitions with various companies in Sonoma County in the Bay Area and back in the cultivation area, but like listening in and knowing a lot of the people onboarding personally was like, for one, nobody put in charge of the BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, which is now the DCC, the Department of Cannabis Control, had experience in cannabis. There's this, sort of idea, even though it becomes normalized, that people who have experience in cannabis are somehow not qualified to run the cannabis industry. So, like the regulations became, as they were written out, just didn't have any of the actual people, stakeholders, opinions and expertise until very late in the game. I think about 2 years ago, finally, somebody on enforcement, a few of the people that became in control started to become in charge and give some real life input. So regulations were a mess rolling out. Of course, one of the things that I'm coming to, with cannabis in general is the overregulation. All it really does is really fuel the black market, because if there's such a leap to become regulated or become licensed, then it makes it impossible. And so they had all cap on licensing everywhere. They also allowed all of the counties and municipalities to make their own decisions around things. And a lot of one of the biggest examples that people know about right now is that there's only to this day, 5 years into legalization, been 6 cultivation licenses given out in Mendocino. There's had to be formed all these 6. Wow. So there's hundreds of farmers and families, and we're talking 3rd generation families that were farming and thriving off of this forever, and naturally should have been given licenses, but the county restricted it. The county had a history of restricting these businesses, and so
yet you have Glass House Brands that's ran by a retired cop who's sending out literally tons and tons in the back door, which is the whole reason why I think that's the epitome of the California market, is you have one of the largest producers selling deliberately in the black market because they're opportunistic, even though they are from the law. They came from the police department. They don't care.
And they put people in jail for that. And one of the things that that's kind of being talked about right now is like getting a legal license is like a license to trap. So that's a perfect example of them being able to do that. As soon as, look, it was what it was, like, because they made survival in the legal market so hard. Another example, like somebody told me, is, locks are made for honest people, so the most honest people really trying to operate on the legal market right now are being held back. Huckleberry Hill Farms, I did an interview with him on a live. He popped into a live and explained he's cost him right now to grow on the legal market $400 a pound. He's getting paid $3 an eighth through the very complicated streamline of the not dispensaries, the distributors,
wholesalers.
Yeah. And they're not paying them out. So he's sitting there, if you're farming and growing, you have to have that timely, funds coming back in so you can plant and grow and afford your nutrients and everything else. So, that's probably the bottom line right there, why the market is failing. And they want to blame the black market a lot. But if they weren't that's causing, also the supply chain. So they brought in 5 agencies in the beginning. They kept adding agencies on. So the regulation costs in the beginning start game became so expensive over and over again. That also put a lot of people out of business.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, but Jill, I'm wondering if you've got any concerns or been hearing concerns on the East Coast about the fires. The West Coast were kind of used to it. Anything out of any advice out of California that you can give to the East Coast? Lavana?
Been seeing a lot of advice circulating around online about what we should be doing here, what you guys have been dealing with in California. And also back to what you were talking about, that just happened here. We're seeing that here a lot with people trying to do the right thing. They can't open, they can't get their licenses, so they are going to turn to black market and they're getting shut down. We just saw that yesterday. I know you posted about it, Lavana. I saw you post about that as well. So
it's nothing new. I worked with a company up in Canada called Agroma Botanical, and they were one of the first 15 companies to get a international export license to Canada. They got slapped on the wrist for selling before the 2.0 in Canada allowed them to sell vape pens. They got slapped on the wrist. They kept doing it, and then they were publicly traded. They got caught again, and they lost everything. They lost the international license. They lost everything. And it's so stupid. We should be learning from these experiences. If you need help, get a co-op, work together with one another. Don't be stupid, because you're going to lose eventually. So learn from our experiences on the West Coast. If you're on the East Coast and you need some help, reach out. It is a community, even though it's somewhat competitive. There's people that have learned things that you can learn from. Just reach out. Don't be dumb.
That's right. And don't point fingers. It's not about fault and blame. It's finding ways to make it work. That's what this industry needs to figure out. It's the collaboration inside competition, but it is collaboration that needs to happen in order for the common good. And California had a very good medical program going, and then they screwed it up by opening it up to the adult use. And and then it became craziness over there. Anyway, hey, Lavana, thanks for the effort. You got on the show. You're welcome here anytime. We look forward to having you on as a regular. Jill, I know you met Lavana in New York, so you guys now are peeps and you're in the hood. So I expect the two of you will hang out and have a sesh together or whatever you guys do. And Josh, thank you so much for being out there, out in Washington State. It means so much to me. And you've been so helpful. And I've made it through the show. And with only about 5 or 6 hacks. So that's not too bad. I'm very happy about that. I have not been 100% since I came back from New York City, but we still put together a very cool news show. It's coming up right after this. And a reminder that every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, we are here talking about the business of cannabis. So please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Okay, use it responsibly. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Coming up on Weed Talk News this week, the fallout from Truliev's dispensary closings in California and Massachusetts. New York's glut of cannabis is starting to make their natives restless. And the NBA continues to be the most progressive professional sports league towards cannabis, and they won't be testing for it anymore. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball welcomes its second CBD company as a sponsor, and that safe banking vote could happen before the end of this month. All that and cannabis reports from coast to coast on We Talk News with Elena Pinto next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto. We start in the foreign land of Colombia, where legalization of cannabis could become a reality before the end of this month. This week, a Senate committee voted 15-4 in favor of a legalization bill that has now passed 7 of 8 steps before it heads to that country's president to sign it into law. The movement in Colombia is designed to halt the illegal market controlled by organized crime in that country and could relieve some of the overcrowding that country's prisons. Their president, Gustavo Petro, appeared before the United Nations last year and urged other nations to change their policies toward cannabis prohibition. Now, it looks like his country could make the bold step of legalization. And back here in the US, the New York market continues to slowly emerge, but there are plenty of people who are losing patience with the slow rollout, especially with the glut of product that has been grown but can't make it to the existing dispensaries. Pam Schmiel has more from the Big Apple.
I'm Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The New York Office of Cannabis Management is in big trouble with those trying to launch a legal cannabis business here in New York State. The other night at a town hall style meeting, they were heckled and booed over their lack of transparency and accountability in the rollout. And because New York farmers are sitting on tons of unsold weed because not enough dispensaries are opening, the state is allowing them to sell at pop-up events like farmers markets, concerts, or other similar venues that don't serve alcohol. And lastly, New York has promised to approve new licenses that are not social equity applicants by September to get more dispensaries open and get this industry off the ground. That's this week's New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Schmiel from the Mary Jane Society podcast, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Out west in Oregon, a conflict of interest of a former state official's involvement with a cannabis company has piqued the interest of a federal investigation. Alibi Cannabis's Marianne Kersagi has more from that state.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The fallout from the LaModa tax scandal continues to spread. Now, federal investigators are issuing subpoenas to gather more information about the consulting agreement with the former Oregon Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan, and the disgraced cannabis retail chain, LaModa. Also, the new aspergillus testing requirements continue to wreak havoc among cultivators. Labs are reporting lower volume of tests on flower as farmers reduce the number of plants in production and move more product to processors. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
Trulieve is a publicly traded cannabis dispensary that is the dominant brand in Florida. This past week, that multi-state operator announced that it would close one dispensary in California and all three in the Bay State of Massachusetts. PCM founder Jimmy Young discussed this development with Chris Ferrone, the author of the weekly Talking Joint memo in our Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis.
Were you surprised, Chris, that Trulieve decided to close all their Massachusetts locations?
Very much so. Not because I wasn't aware of what was going on, and certainly labor issues and workers organizing and all sorts of troubles on multiple fronts. But, we've seen a million times an easy rebrand. But I think the issues are deeper. And as we're, learning more and more, and we're seeing why it happened now. But yes, of course I was surprised, because most consumers, no offense to them, don't, I know that the informed ones aren't watching. The informed ones are watching your show, but the majority of people, they don't know, they don't care. They're looking for the cheapest or the highest tack. And I understand that. I'm not here to insult those people, but certainly corporations and branding operations have a ways around this, but I guess this was a little too deep.
Yeah, and I wonder how much the issue they had with the employee at the beginning of the year who breathed the keef dust and ended up having a reaction to that. How much of a factor do you think that made in this decision for Trulieve?
Well, I think that was the factor that led to, OSHA investigations. And other federal, basically impugnments of the operation. And listen, I don't want to speculate. I don't know what they were expecting. I don't know what they're trying to dodge, but it certainly appears to have had an impact, because like I said, if it's just kind of, that people are, hating on the brand, Trulieve also kind of been getting, and I got to say, I can't stand whether it's an MSO or a small, everybody, your weed sucks, but Trulieve certainly has been slapped with the Mids label, and, Wiz Khalifa, who is one of their, big hip hop artists, who they do his brand. He's caught some flack on social media, but that, like I said, they could have just fixed all that like this. Also, listen, Trulieve is one of those brands that when I'm in some other states, it's like, oh my God, you drive every 10 minutes and you see a Trulieve dispensary. They certainly, not to give them an out here, but they certainly have other business in play. So maybe it just wasn't worth it. But there's one thing, we can't complain about MSOs only caring about the bottom line and then complain when they only care about the bottom line. That's what they do. And certainly there were calculations made. I know a lot of people wish they, stayed and faced the music. I certainly, that there's the kind of that thing, like if you're in an elevator that just broke last week, it's probably not going to break again this week.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, the head of the U.S. Health and Human Services Department in Washington, D.C. confirms that report on rescheduling cannabis will be ready for President Biden before the end of this year. In Maryland, the Cookies dispensary gets shut down for multiple marketing violations. Sales of adult use of cannabis passes medical sales for the first time in Connecticut, but a botched cannabis carjacking in Hartford ends with the murder of an 18-year-old student from Yukon. And the first Flower Expo in Massachusetts launches in Greenfield to rave reviews and a packed parking lot for the private B2B event. All that and coast-to-coast cannabis reports on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another weekly edition of We Talk News with Elena Pinto. No, I'm not Elena Pinto. I am PCM founder Jimmy Young, filling in for Elena, who's on vacation for the rest of this month. Our top story this week is finally some encouraging news about the or descheduling of cannabis at the federal level. The head of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, told Marijuana Moment in Washington, D.C. that he expects his report will be presented to President Biden before the end of this year. Our man in Washington, D.C. is Andrew Berenger, and he has more.
Hello, this is Andrew Berenger from Washington, D.C., reporting for We Talk News. In cannabis federal news, the head of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has committed to presenting President Joe Biden with a federal cannabis scheduling decision this year, per the president's directive that a decision be issued at the federal level. The Food and Drug Administration is conducting a comprehensive 8-step scientific review of cannabis to inform on the scheduling decision. This decision will impact whether cannabis remains a Schedule I drug, which is the category for the most strictly controlled drugs under the Controlled Substances Act. HHS, in collaboration with other agencies, including the Drug Enforcement Agency, is working to provide on an evidence-based recommendation to the president. In other news, the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, also known as CADCA, a leading anti-drug group, recently warned that the bipartisan Cannabis Banking Reform Bill, which grants cannabis businesses access to FDIC-insured banks, would have severe consequences if passed by Congress, including an alarming rise in traffic fatalities, increased youth use rates, and a surge in emergency room visits and hospitalizations. The impact of cannabis legalization on traffic safety remains a topic of debate. Numerous studies, including federally funded research, have shown that teen consumption of cannabis remains stable or even declines after states establish a regulated adult use market. Now, that's all for the federal level. In Maryland cannabis news, recently, a federal judge has ruled that Mackie Barch, co-founder of Maryland's largest medical cannabis enterprise, Culta, must return $6.4 million worth of company shares to his partner due to his failure to fulfill an agreement for equal equity ownership division. Neither Barch's nor the plaintiff's names were originally listed on the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission application in 2015, citing tax and legal complications as the reason. Barch, who has a prior misdemeanor drug possession conviction, transferred his ownership shares to comply with regulations barring him from owning a cannabis business. The impending opening of Maryland's adult use cannabis market this July 1st is expected to bring significant changes to the local industry and market. Stay tuned for further updates. Well, that will do it for me, Andrew Berenger, in the DC area report for We Talk News. Have a good day.
Interesting to note here that all the previous stories were from states that are relatively new to the legal cannabis industry. Now, that doesn't mean that the markets in Washington State or Oregon are thriving. In fact, both states are great examples of the regulatory and compliance rules and laws that are in place as the industry becomes more normalized, and they still have issues. Here's Matthew Friedlander in Washington and Marianne Kersage in Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The New York Times today highlighted one of the dynamics of the Oregon-Idaho border. The small Oregon town of Ontario is one of the hottest for cannabis sales because it is right on the Idaho border. Customers from Idaho have a huge impact on sales in Ontario. This will change if Idaho legalizes. Also, the dumpster fire that is the Oregon regulatory agencies continues to overreact to the fallout of the LaModa tax delinquencies. While agencies have had authority since 2019 to consider tax matters while renewing cannabis licenses, they have not exercised this authority, which contributed to the lack of oversight causing the LaModa debacle. Now, temporary rules are being passed that will require all taxes to be paid or to be on a payment plan for all owners of retail licenses in order to renew the license. Taxes include not only state sales tax and business taxes, but also personal taxes. This is a huge overreach, which will cause unimaginable ripple effects. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
One of our most proud features in our news is our international reporters. So now let's go overseas to see what's happening in the European market and in Canada. Lex Pelger reports from France, and Debbie Facey is in Ontario.
Hello everyone, I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. On hemp leaves, a big change from the European Commission. Currently, it's been 4 years since the European Commission made the controversial decision to classify all parts of the hemp plant as a novel food, meaning that companies in the EU would need to apply for novel food status in order to legally sell cannabinoid-based products containing less than 0.3% THC. This week, after the European Industrial Hemp Association made the proposal last year and presented evidence that hemp leaves were commonly used for making hemp tea infusions prior to 1997, the Commission agreed to modify the novel food catalog and remove hemp leaves from it. This will help companies who use hemp leaves in their products be safe from seizures or unnecessary administrative requirements. However, any companies producing full-spectrum hemp extracts or CBD isolates in EU will still be required to go through a novel food application. After the Czech Republic's recent proposed ban of CBD under novel food laws, the European Industrial Hemp Association has launched a separate bid to have natural hemp-extracted products classified as a traditional food. We'll keep you informed as this proposal winds through the EU bureaucracy. In Malta, after widespread criticism of their pioneering regulatory framework for adult-use cannabis, the Authority for the Responsible Use of Cannabis has released a new set of fine-tuned rules based on stakeholder feedback. It's been argued that the previous rules made it quite difficult for the grassroots community members and legacy growers to set up the cannabis associations that Malta designated as the primary way to provide cannabis to people. One important change is to allow a modular approach to the Cannabis Association application. With this, the groups will not have to secure a lease on a property before they know that their application will be moving forward. Also, the stringent testing requirements will be dialed down, especially because there are only 2 testing machines on the entire archipelago. Another rule change is for the transportation of cannabis. Previously, cannabis could only be transported by individuals with the same license needed to transport toxic, radioactive, and explosive substances. But now there will be a new certification for cannabis alone issued by the regulatory body itself. However, it will still be required that cannabis will only be transported in tracked, temperature-controlled trucks with the products inside a locked safe. Finally, associations will no longer be required to incinerate their cannabis waste at landfills and will now be allowed to compost it instead. With a year and a half since the set up the Authority for the Responsible Use of Cannabis, the hope is that these rule changes will expand applications from the current 7 and lead to some of these associations actually getting approved and up and running. Finally, in Lithuania, the parliament just approved their national agenda for drugs and harm reduction through 2035. One of the proposals would decriminalize the possession, acquisition, storage, and transportation of small amounts of cannabis. Under this proposal, instead of criminal penalties, those caught with cannabis would face fines of 50 to 300 euros. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
Now we turn to the world of publicly traded cannabis stocks, a group of stocks that are particularly volatile. Hexo and Tilray are no exception. Hexo is ready to be acquired by Tilray Brands that is sure to put another wrinkle into reading the tea leaves or the 7-pointed leaf called cannabis. Here's Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report, reporting for Weed Talk News. Let's discuss some Canadian cannabis companies, Aurora Cannabis and Hexo. They both reported some major losses. First, Aurora Cannabis lost $65 million for 3 months ending in March 31st, 2023. And next, Hexo reported a total net loss before tax of $98 million in the company's third quarter. But Hexo is still taking over Tilray for $56 million. Seems crazy to me, but that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report, reporting for Weed Talk News. I'm Doug Miller.
At the top of the show, we told you that U.S. Health and Human Services Director Javier Becerra told Marijuana Moment that he expects to have his Biden-directed report on or descheduling of cannabis off the most restricted Schedule 1 of Controlled Substances Act before the end of this year. Now the Pennsylvania House wants to lend their support. Here's Claudia Post with our Pennsylvania Cannabis Report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Referred to the House Pennsylvania Judiciary Committee on May 30th and amended on June 7th, House Resolution 420 urged the removal of cannabis as a Schedule 1 controlled substance, listing several points opposing the current placement of cannabis as a Schedule 1 narcotic. The bill stated that as of March 2023, 38 states had approved cannabis for medical purposes, and 21 states had legalized cannabis for recreational use. After providing the definition of a Schedule 1 substance under the 1971 Controlled Substances Act, a substance considered to have high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use, that's the definition. The bill listed medical conditions that scientific research has shown cannabis to be helpful in treating, including epilepsy, chronic pain, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Also noted with the classification of fentanyl as a Schedule 2 substance and of 70,000 American deaths in 2021 due to overdoses involving synthetic opioids. Well, there you go. Therefore, the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania urges the Congress of the United States, the President of the United States, and the Attorney General of the United States, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Department of Health, to remove cannabis as a Schedule 1 controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act. Now, this is a big deal for Pennsylvania. We're really stepping out here because there's a lot of conservatives here, but I believe that, of course, we're all aiming for recreational in the very near future. Well, that's a wrap. I'm Claudia Post. I'll be here next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
One of the most challenging reforms in legal states and at the federal level is how to detect a plant medicine like cannabis that stays in your system for 30 days, especially if you are driving under the influence, because driving under the influence of alcohol has been proven many, many times how dangerous that is. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving did a great job of educating the public back starting in 1980. That was in California. Now, detecting an impaired driver under the influence of cannabis has become a favorite issue of prohibitionists who are not in favor of reform. In fact, even in New Hampshire, where the state controls their legal alcohol industry, the Live Free or Die state has made some noise about reforming their laws for adult use, but have yet to get that out of their Senate. Sure enough, in the Senate session this week, that OUI or DUI issue was brought up again before their summer recess. That pretty much ended the latest reform efforts in the only state in New England that has not made the adult use legal. Here's another report from a mature cannabis state, the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. There are adult use cannabis licenses issued in the city of Riverview, but nobody's sure for how long that will last. That's because a citizens group has gathered enough signatures to have a challenge to that policy placed on the August primary ballot. City Council in December authorized the storefronts, but currently none of them are open. The citizen group Let Riverview Vote collected almost 600 signatures in time to have the vote take place in August, when fewer voters show up to the polls and the voting demographic tends to skew towards the elderly. A pro-cannabis group from the city has launched VoteNo.net in order to rally support for the cannabis businesses. But this is not the first time a group in Michigan has entertained a move to ban existing cannabis businesses from city streets. Langsburg, in the last election cycle, voted to roll back their 2 cannabis retail operations to a single retailer. But other local efforts to ban cannabis businesses have failed to get the votes. Well, Traverse City is the #1 place in the USA for cannabis use. according to a recent ranking by an online sports betting organization. According to their research, more than 65% of Traverse City residents have tried cannabis in the past, and that leads the nation. Second place for most cannabis users per capita, Grand Rapids, with more than 64% of residents reporting that they get high. Having said that, the ranking also rated Traverse as the cocaine capital of America, with about 24% of residents reporting powder inhalation. These figures come as the betting group tries to name the nation's top 10 wildest cities. In addition to measuring cannabis and cocaine use, the group factored in casino availability, number of strip clubs per 100,000 residents, and self-reported heavy or binge drinking among residents and visitors. Traverse City was number 3 on the wildest cities list, and Grand Rapids was the number 10 wildest in the nation, with Reno, Nevada taking the top spot. Now, there's a lot to criticize in this ranking. Traverse City has just over 15,000 residents, and that small population certainly skewed the per capita numbers significantly. Plus, everybody knows Grand Rapids is just not that fun. To see all the wildest ranking results, you can go to olbg.com. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
There's a horrible story coming out of Connecticut later last week. An 18-year-old student from Yukon had his car held up and was murdered. Police reported that there was an abundance of cannabis in that car, and that probably is why his car was targeted. Connecticut is one of the newest New England states to start their adult use market, and we now have a reporter from the Nutmeg State. Her name is Angie Seifert.
I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors with the Connecticut Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A new regulation was signed by Governor Ned Lamont, allowing medical and adult use cannabis licensees to deduct, for state tax purposes, ordinary and necessary business expenses that would typically be eligible for a federal tax deduction, but aren't because of cannabis being considered Schedule I, as known as 280E. Connecticut isn't the only state with a tax relief as a goal. New York, New Jersey, and Illinois are also discussing and passing legislation on these matters. This will be a game changer for cannabis entrepreneurs in Connecticut and these other states looking to get off the ground with working capital available. Additionally, adult use sales both hit a record high in May and also surpassed medical sales, which is very common in legal states. 11.5 million adult use sales and 11.2 million medical sales, totaling 22.7 million for the month. Monthly adult use sales have more than doubled since retailers opened shop. And while more individual items purchased at medical dispensaries compared to adult use, the average price in the medical program was about $4 less than the adult use market. Come July 1st, it will be free registration to get a medical license, and currently there is no excise tax and potency cap for medical. I'm looking forward to seeing if this will impact the relationships between adult use and medical. Finally, cannabis delivery has commenced. Fine Fettel's Manchester location has partnered with Green Coach Delivery, who is currently one of the 12 licensed cannabis delivery services in the state. There is no cost markup on delivery of cannabis items, though there is a $10 delivery fee on orders less than $150, and currently there is a geographic limit. Fine Fettel is the first to offer this delivery option in Connecticut, and it won't be the last. That's the Connecticut Cannabis News Report for this week. I'm Angie Seifert from Skip Intro Advisors, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Meanwhile, Vermont just continues to develop their legal adult use market and its outdoor growing season in Vermont. A short season for sure, but still very impactful. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with the Vermont Report, sponsored by Canatrol.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. On June 14th, Governor Scott allowed what was once called the Omnibus Cannabis Bill to pass into law without his signature, mimicking how all other Vermont cannabis laws have moved forward. This bill adds some needed protections for small farmers and social equity in the adult use market and increases some supports for patients in the medical program. On June 22nd, Vermont Growers Association will be hosting their monthly community discussion for cultivators by cultivators. The market is what we make it. On June 24th, Vermont Growers Association will also be hosting the first of its kind cannabis job fair for those interested in hiring or seeking employment. For more information on both, visit vermontgrowers.org. The Green Mountain Patients Alliance is hosting a harm reduction and education workshop on June 23rd at Forbin's Finest adult use retailer in Barrie to discuss the Vermont opioid crisis and the synergy between cannabis and opioids, as well as the Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association training participants in Narcan administration. For more information, visit greenmountainpatients.org. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
The nation's oldest and most lucrative cannabis state market is California. The largest, most progressive state in the country still is struggling with trying how to figure out how to regulate their adult use industry while taking a bite out of the deeply rooted legacy market. It's complicated. That's why we're so happy to welcome a new reporter to Weed Talk News. She's Lavana Vasa, and this is her first California Cannabis Report.
Hi, I'm Lavana Vasa, and this is what's happening in the California cannabis industry right now. One of the most interesting stories currently unfolding is about the Catalyst versus Greenhouse Brands court case. A complaint was filed on June 6, 2023 at the Los Angeles County Superior Court by the Office of Jeff Augustini for 562 Discount Med Inc., aka Catalyst, a Long Beach-based licensed distributor and retail competitor, to Glasshouse Brands Inc., who is a Goliath, California-based cannabis brand. The complaint accuses the defendant of bad business practices. They claim that the defendant, Glasshouse Brands, has been profiting off of black market sales by using burner distros to ship their products via airplane nationwide. They also accuse the defendant of publicly posting the revenue generated from these black market sales to boost their brand's value. A little about Glasshouse Brands. The company was founded in 2015 by Kyle Kazan, a former law enforcement officer, and Graham Ferrara, with 150 square foot cultivation in Santa Barbara. The partners quickly stacked licenses up and doubled their growth to 300K. They now operate the largest cultivation in the state with over 2 million square feet of greenhouses, with the capacity to grow more than 300,000 pounds annually. In 2020, they made headlines by becoming listed on the Canadian stock market, raising $140 million in capital, which they used to buy their state-of-the-art 5.5 million acre grow in Ventura County. In 2022, they reported $90 million in revenue and $35 million in losses. I will be following this story as it unfolds. This is Lavana Vasa reporting on California for the Pro Cannabis Network.
And finally, the Massachusetts Report has a new sponsor this week. CNA Stores in Amesbury and Haverhill is veteran-owned and family-operated. This is the Bay State Cannabis Report, and sure enough, the Cannabis Control Commission is still trying to figure out what to do with social club licenses and other directives from the law passed in 2016. One item that gained attention and discussion this week, which is amazing to me, is the fact that veterans are still being victimized by the archaic federal laws that won't allow our veterans gaining any access to medical marijuana. Now, they can still have plenty of opioids, but no plant medicines. So now the state wants to add PTSD to that list of the state diagnoses to qualify for a medical card. Now, this end around will allow our veterans to gain a card for a fee and buy medical cannabis for a fee. It won't be free like those VA doctor prescribed opioids, but at least they will have access to the plant medicine that can help them. You know, of all the injustices that this industry and those most impacted by the failed war on drugs must endure, the fact that our veterans don't have access to a plant that can help them gain transition back into society is just unconscionable to me. These veterans have put their lives on the line for our freedoms by serving in the military and can't get access to a plant? Come on. Out in Greenfield, Massachusetts, a sleepy New England town in northwestern part of the state near North Adams, the Flower Expo made its debut as a private event for the business-to-business community in the Bay State. There were over 200 exhibitors there, and it was packed. Congratulations to Jason and Todd Bello, who organized this event, which is sure to become a must-attend show and, of course, after party in the New England cannabis calendar. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm PCM founder Jimmy Young, filling in for the vacationing Elena Pinto. Thanks for bearing with my voice challenges today. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
The Massachusetts Cannabis Report on Weed Talk News is supported by CNA Stores, a veteran-owned and family-operated cannabis dispensary with 2 locations in Amesbury and in Haverhill, dedicated to the community north of Boston and to consumers by providing the widest selection of products in the state.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1,300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.